Hello and welcome to the Bear Games channel. I am the Bristly Bear, and today I am going to talk about the Netflix adaptation of Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about one of the characters in the story that seems somewhat like a side character. However, for those of you who have watched the series, and if you haven't watched the series, then go ahead and shut this off right now and go do it. You have no excuse. If you are a lover of stories, this is a story you will love. If you don't personally have Netflix, find someone who does and go watch this story. For those of you who have watched it, and I have watched a lot of reaction videos for people that have watched it, and I think that most of you may not be aware of the full breadth of the story, and that means you don't know who Lyta Hall really is. In the TV adaptation, she seems very much like a side character. However, what I'm going to talk about today is who she really is and how much of an influence she really has on this story. So stay tuned, and we are going to talk about Lyta Hall in Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. Okay, so you have watched the first season of The Sandman and you have just loved it. I know you have, how could you not? And you are familiar with the character of Lyta Hall, who was the best friend of Rose Walker in the story. Now, what you may not know is Lyta Hall is so much more than you see in this season of The Sandman. For instance, her name, Lyta, is actually short for Hippolyta or Hippolyta because she was named after her grandmother, whose name was Hippolyta. And her full name, Lyta Trevor Hall, is very indicative of who she is. Her family name, Trevor, is because her father's name is Steve Trevor. And you may be familiar with that name. Yes, Steve Trevor, the person that Wonder Woman is in love with. And the reason that's important, of course, is because Lyta Trevor Hall is the daughter of none other than Wonder Woman. She is an important, influential character in DC Comics in very small ways that cause huge ripples. But she is a superhero, and she is none other than the daughter of Wonder Woman. Now, in the show, they do not make an issue of this in any way. And in fact, in the book, it's really not made an issue of at all. If you are not familiar with her history, then you wouldn't know it even reading the books. So, the reason for this is because when they made the Sandman television show, they did not have the rights to using the DC Comics characters such as Wonder Woman. So they had to pretty much cut out, in clever ways, any references to her actual history. However, if you watch some of the episodes, there are small hints to the connections of the Sandman within the larger DC Comics universe, because it very much is part of the DC Comics universe. So who was this superhero, Lyta Hall? Well, her superhero name was called the Fury. And of course, she named herself after the Greek mythological Furies because of her connected past through her mother and through her grandmother to Greece and to all of Greek mythology. Her boyfriend, Hector Hall, is actually the son of one Carter Hall, which, if you are quite a comic book nerd, you will know that Carter Hall is called the Hawkman. So her boyfriend, Hector Hall, is the son of the Hawkman. And in the comics, he is called the Silver Scarab. Now, Lyta and Hector created their own superhero group, which they called Infinity Inc. And Infinity Inc. consisted of sons and daughters and goddaughters and heirs to all of the superheroes in the Justice Society of America, which was the alternate Earth version of the Justice League. Now, these heroes were called Golden Age heroes, which meant that they were the original versions of these heroes in the comics. However, as time passed for DC Comics, they ended up splitting them off into a separate Earth, an alternate version than the Justice League Earth that people are more familiar with Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman. However, they did have all of those characters in this alternate version of Earth 2. Now, Infinity Inc. Consisted of a lot of other heroes. There is Albert Rothstein, who goes by the name of Nuklon and is actually the son of the Golden Age Atom, who was a member of the Justice Society of America. There's also Jenny Lynn Hayden and Todd Rice, who are twins. However, they were both orphaned and were separated at birth and grew up in different families, so never knew each other. They are the daughter and son of the Earth 2 version of the Green Lantern. Jenny Lynn Hayden has almost exact powers to her father, the Green Lantern, whose name is Alan Scott, except she does not require a lantern and does not have to charge her ring to have her abilities. They just come naturally to her. Her twin brother, Todd, is kind of exactly the opposite. He has power over darkness and can actually become darkness, become a shadow, and eventually learns how to control darkness. Now there's also Helena Wayne, who calls herself the Huntress. On Earth 2, she is the daughter of Batman, Bruce Wayne, and the Catwoman, Selina Kyle. Other characters that join their group are Henry King, who calls himself Brainwave Jr., who has mental powers and is the son of the original villain on Earth 2 called the Brainwave, and also Power Girl, who is the Earth 2 version of Supergirl. However, she is a very different character from the Supergirl that you may be familiar with. And here we have Norda, who goes by the superhero name of Northwind, who is from a race of half-bird and half-human people, and the race are called Phaethyrans, and they live in a secret society of Phaethira that is in the northern hemisphere of Earth, and he is the godson of Hawkman, so the god brother to Silver Scarab, Hector Hall. And lastly, you'll see here the Star-Spangled Kid, who is actually a member of the Justice Society of America, and he agrees to kind of become a mentor to these kids as they learn how their powers work and learn to work together as a team. All of these people come together and they form Infinity Incorporated and intend to join the Justice Society of America. However, their parents, when they present themselves to them, do not believe that they have enough experience and refuse to allow them to join the Justice Society. So they intend to go out on their own and have their own adventures and prove themselves. Now, one of the reasons I really enjoyed Infinity Inc., and it was one of my favorite comic books growing up, because I was drawn to the idea, of course, of the children of the Justice Society and them creating their own group, pretty much the Teen Titan group of Earth 2. But beyond that, I really appreciated not only the stories, although they did get a little bit outlandish at times, and they certainly had some interesting villains that they fought. But what really fascinated me about this was the art style. First of all, it was drawn in a very realistic style, and the characters often broke the fourth wall within the comics panels. In other words, often they would be going outside of the individual panels just as something more interesting to look at. And I had never seen anything like that in any of the other books up to date. So they really were doing something new. Now, Infinity Inc. was not a hugely popular comic. I just don't know if it was very well known at the time. However, it did end up having a lot of repercussions throughout the DC universe. It ran from 1984 to 1988. And the Sandman books by Neil Gaiman started the following year of 1989. So to me, it was amazing that Neil Gaiman took this relatively unknown group and managed to insert it in such an interesting way into his comics. And it was very subtle. It was a very subtle way, and it was quite possible that you could read the Sandman comics and never really get that connection. For instance, Hector Hall, the boyfriend of Lyta Hall in the TV show and in the comics, he dies. However, his body, his spirit, I should say, becomes trapped in the dreaming. And he is manipulated by a couple of nightmares that were created by Dream, and who make him believe that he is a superhero called the Sandman, who is constantly fighting nightmares throughout the world. He is only allowed to leave the dreaming for 1 hour every day, which he always goes and spends with his wife, Lyta Hall. And that is how she ends up conceiving their son, who Dream of the Endless eventually lays claim to, because it is conceived by someone who exists only in the dreaming. Now, this may sound familiar if you have watched the show, because you saw young Ned, the younger brother to Rose Walker, playing a superhero and being manipulated by a nightmare. And this is very directly taken from the original story. The character that young Ned is playing is exactly the same superhero that Hector Hall actually was. Now, the Infinity Inc. team eventually disbanded, and their comic ended in 1988. Partially because of the death of Hector Hall and also the death of other people related. However, their characters did go on to be involved in other parts of the DC universe. For instance, if you saw the recent Black Adam movie, you are familiar with Nuklon, the character who can grow to huge proportions. That was part of the Justice Society team. And that is the same Albert Rothstein Nuklon that was from Infinity Incorporated. Now, getting back to Lyta Hall, you have no idea what kind of repercussions Lyta Hall will have on Dream and the entire DC universe, truly. Now, here I am going to give something of a spoiler. So, cut away if you're not interested. However, I believe that this is less of a spoiler than it is more of a foreshadowing of the tale of Dream of the Endless. And since, unfortunately, I think it's unlikely that the story will ever go far enough in its seasons to get to this point, I'm going to go ahead and reveal it because it can only make the story seem more interesting to you. Lyta Hall becomes very instrumental in actually causing the destruction, the death of Dream of the Endless. You've seen on the show that his younger sister, Desire, very much wants to mess with Dream and cause either just trouble in his life, difficulties, or in fact, try to destroy him entirely. He ends up manipulating Lyta Hall to the point where she can cause the ultimate destruction of Dream of the Endless. And that is how the comic book of the Sandman eventually ends. with the death of Dream and the repercussions of what happens after that. If you are interested in that story, I highly recommend reading a short comic book story, a miniseries called The Furies. And it features Lyta Hall and her descent into insanity when her young son is stolen from her, and she believes that it is stolen by Dream of the Endless, since he threatened that he would eventually one day do that. And the story follows her search for her son and her complete descent into insanity as she does so. So, there you go. A much broader picture of who Lyta Trevor Hall is in the Sandman series. And hopefully that will make it more interesting for you as you continue to watch the series and as we all look forward to season 2 coming out. And hopefully it will include more of the story of Lyta Hall, the daughter of Wonder Woman, in the story of Dream of the Endless. Once again, thank you so much for watching my channel, and I would appreciate, of course, subscribing and liking this video if you enjoyed its content, and helping it get to more people that might be interested in hearing about Lyta Hall and who love the Sandman TV series and are looking forward to the second season of it as much as I am. So once again, for the Bear Games channel, I'm the Bristly Bear, and thanks again for watching.